I wanted to cover a few tips and tricks for using Netbeans because it has a lot of nice features. So I'm going to go over a little list of them here. So first one, very, very simple. Double-clicking a tab maximizes and restores it. So if you're working on something and you've got an interface that's full of stuff and you want to unclutter, just double-click. So I double-click keygen.h and it, temporarily maximizes. Double-click again to restore all of your old windows. You can do this with any tab. So for example, the output tab, double-click, now it's full screen. Double-click goes back to your original configuration. So it's quite nice if you want to temporarily focus on something. Bookmarks, expand, double-click, make it small, and so on. Second thing is split panes. So you can actually have separate kind of split panes. Just click and drag tabs and you can arrange things in all sorts of different ways, which is quite nice. You can do this with different files, so you can have stuff just like side by side, which can be quite nice, especially if you have a larger monitor. But you can also do this with a single file. So, for example, keygen.h, if I want to be working down here on something, but I want to look at some part above here for reference while I'm doing that, I want to look at keygen-zip-f data while I'm looking at working on keygen-zip-f, then I can take this little plus up here, I can click and drag that. So I can drag it for like a horizontal split or for a vertical split. Just depends what you want. I'll do a horizontal split in this case, so I can look up here at zip-f data while I'm over here. So I've actually got a split of the same file. I actually just realized I want to talk about the history tab as well, so I'll add that to the plan. This is sort of like a live event. So when I want to get rid of this separate tab, I just kind of drag it to the edge. So you can split individual files, which is nice. Control-click, this one is super useful. So if you're working on some project where you didn't design all of it and you're not sure what everything is, you can press Control-click on something to go to the definition. So Control-click takes me to the definition of next. I can then Control-click seed to see where seed is defined, and I can even Control-click uint64t to see where that's defined. It opens up something in the standard library, and you can see uint64t is actually double underscore, and that's actually unsigned long int. So you can actually trace stuff, pretty far, just using Control-click. Now, Control-click doesn't always work. It only works if code assistance is actually functioning for your project. Code assistance can stop functioning for weird reasons, because basically the project is only compiled according to a makefile, so technically speaking the IDE doesn't exactly know how it's compiled. The IDE isn't that involved in the compilation process, so it essentially uses kind of its best guess after it's built at the last binary that was built or something like that. There are ways of explicitly configuring code assistance if you want to mess around with the code assistance options. Then you go to code assistance and you can go configure code assistance. Sometimes the reparse project button is useful if you've got some sort of funky code assistance mix-ups that you want to clear up. You can just try doing this. You can try doing clear C++ cache and restart IDE. And configure gives you a bunch of different options. You can actually feed it your binaries to have it disassemble the binaries basically and get lots of really nice code assistance from it. Otherwise, it's kind of best effort code assistance. So I would expect when I start up a project, basically no code assistance or very little before the first compile, and after I've compiled, somehow the Netbeans IDE gets a little bit smarter over time at answering your queries with control clicks and things like that. Anyway, good thing to know about. The next thing is sort of going back and forward in the activity stack. So in web pages you have like back and forward buttons. You have this in tons of other programs as well, including Netbeans. So Alt-left and Alt-right are the hotkeys for that. So for example, I just control-clicked a bunch of things to get here, right? If I press Alt-left, I can go back. So now I'm back to the sort of, in some sense, there's like a stack where every time I take an action, it gets pushed on the stack. When I go Alt-left, I go back in the stack. And if I go Alt-right, I'll go forward in the stack. So Alt-left, back to the seed, Alt-left, back to where I control-clicked the seed, Alt-left, back to where I control-clicked next, Alt-right, 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 Alt-right. I can kind of go Alt-left and Alt-right, and I can pop up and down the stack, which is really nice. Really, really nice for exploring code you don't know. You're like, okay, now I know what next is. What about numeric limits? Ah, I see. Alt-left. Okay, how about max key? Where's that? Control-click that. Oh, it's here in keygen, zip-f data. Alt-left. I'm back to where I was. What about some probs? Oh, that's here. Alt left. I'm back where I was. So you can very quickly kind of navigate code as you're trying to understand it by using Alt left. So you can dive with Control-click and then return from the dive really efficiently with Alt left. And I'll close all these little tabs here before you proceed. Okay, so that's Alt left and Alt right. Now how about call graphs? So call graphs are pretty cool. Normally there's something that you might think about producing manually, but it turns out there's a plugin for Netbeans. If you want to figure out what plugin it is, just refer to my previous video on Netbeans where I just showed what plugins I have. You can find one of those that gives you call graph support. Just install all of them if you don't want to figure it out. So if I want to understand how code works, one of the nice ways of doing that is to actually generate a call graph. So I can right-click, for example, let's say I want a call graph of this next function. I can go show call graph, and now I just have this nice little call graph appearing on the right. I don't really care about this little part, so I'll collapse that. And then let's make this a little bigger. With holding control and rolling the mouse wheel, I can make things bigger or smaller, and I can change the layout of this stuff. So hierarchical layout, top down, inverted hierarchy, a grid layout, horizontal. So let's do a hierarchical layout. So what does this tell us? This tells us that keygen zipf, the next function calls the floor function. It calls the next function of a random FNV1A class, and it also calls max of numeric limits. And you might wonder, well, what does this FNV1A call? So you can right-click on it, and you can go expand callees. That's what it calls. Well, it doesn't call anything. It's a terminal function. Well, how about callers? You can ask, well, what actually calls this key generator zipf next? So I can expand the callers. And in this case, code assistance has failed us, and it can't actually figure out that this is being called by anything. Okay, so let's look for something that's a little bit, not so trivial. This thing is only used from one place anyway. Let's look for something that's not quite so trivial. So we'll go into another piece of code. Oh, actually, really nice, another nice couple sets of hotkeys that'll come in handy here. So ctrl-shift-MINUS is collapse all code blocks in a file. I can't type. So if I go ctrl-shift-MINUS here, there, all my code blocks get collapsed, which just makes it a lot easier to sort of navigate. And then when I want to so I'm going to maximize this temporarily. Let's say we want to see in the trial function, I want to expand the trial function. So I can double click to expand, or I can control plus, control minus, control plus. Of course, it only expands one level. If I want to expand all the levels inside this function, I kind of need not a plus expand. I need a multiply out to expand everything. So I actually bound a hotkey to do that in my Netbeans. It's called Ctrl-8. So that multiplies everything out. It's sort of, 8. Shift-8 is star, right? So Ctrl-8 was what I did. If you want to see how to bind that hotkey yourself, you can go Options, Tools, Options, Key Map, and then, so for me, I can search in shortcuts for Ctrl-8, and that action is called Expand Fold Tree. So I mapped it to Ctrl-8. How would you find it yourself? You would go search and go Expand Fold Tree. So Expand Fold Tree, you can give it an alternative shortcut. You can give it a shortcut. So I gave it Ctrl-8. So I multiply this out, and now we might want to understand, what does this trial function call? So I'm going to go back, double-click this to go back to our regular view, and I'm going to go show call graph on trial. So this thing calls a lot of stuff. I want a left to right layout here, so let's go horizontal layout. So here's all the stuff it calls. I can make it a little bit bigger. I can hide some of the things I don't care about. I don't care about exit, so I can just go hide function. I don't care about now, I can go hide function. Probably you could hide a lot of these things that you don't really care about. I don't care about endl, duration cast, nano sleep. I know what all those things do, and so on and so forth. I don't care about thread or join. But let's say you had a bunch of functions. You don't know what they do, like thread timed. You can expand the callees of thread timed. Oh, well, it calls all these things. And then you might want to ask, well, what's trial called from? So we'll expand the callers. Well, it's called from main continue with globals, which is called from main. And does main continue with globals call anything else? Expand callees? Yes, it calls a whole bunch of other stuff. So you can end up building this, as complicated as you like call graph. You can keep hiding things and you can keep showing things. And it's quite a nice tool for trying to break down what's actually happening in a project. Now, you might not have the ability to actually expand these things until you've compiled the project. So compile it first, then get your code assistance working, and then you'll have this nice view. Now, If I want to get a little more value out of this, I can actually control-click, sorry, not control-click, I can just double-click these things to jump straight to them in the code. So if I double-click trial, I go straight to trial. If I want to go, oh, it calls thread timed, let's go straight to thread timed. I can just jump to thread timed and control-8, expand it, and start looking at it. If I want to know what line of code it calls thread timed from, there's this arrow from trial to thread timed. I can double-click that. Oh, it's called here when we create a new thread timed. If I want to see, well, where's Pappy init program called? I can double-click that. If there are multiple call sites, then I don't know how to visit all of them. I think it just visits the first one. And then you can kind of, control-F. Whoops, not control-G. You kind of control-F and press, go next, 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 and, just use the text search option. So that's a quick crash course in the call graph. Close that. Another helpful hotkey to know is ctrl-g, which is to go to a specific line. When you see errors in GDB and it's like, oh, segfault at line 854 of this file, it's nice to just type 854 and go straight there. Alt-left, I can go back. Okay, so that's the call graph. I'll write down ctrl-g as well. Go to line. Alt-F7 is kind of a nice one. This is sort of functionality that's already covered by the call graph, figuring out where something is used. But there is, some functionality built into Netbeans that doesn't depend on the call graph function to do this. So, for example, if I want to see, where are all the places in the code where trial is used, I can press Alt-F7, and it'll give you the option search in comments or not. And you can select a scope. You can do an all projects in one particular project. So I'll click find, and here I see it's used at line 1018 of trial G. I can go for something more complicated. That was a function. I can go for like a definition. So max threads pow2. If I control-click that, it doesn't take me anywhere. This is indeed defined, but this is tricky because it's defined in a makefile with a -D on the compilation line. So I'm not too surprised I can't find this. What's extra funny here is ctrl-click can't find it, but control-mouse over actually shows you what the definition is. So some components of Netbeans not stitching themselves together so well. But if I want to see all the places where this is used, I can press Alt-F7 and go find, and I get this crazy list of all the different places where it's used, all the different files. I can sort of maximize this to see. So you can double-click one of these to go straight there. You can press Alt-left to go back. And you can actually press Control-period and Control-comma, Control-comma, and Control-period. Control-comma is previous usage, and Control-period is next usage. And this is because they're like the less than sign and the greater than sign, which look like left and right arrows, right? So right to next, next, next. I can actually just quickly iterate through all of the different usages of this thing in my entire project. And when you do this, you end up with tons of files open at the top here. So you kind of have to deal with those. Let's see if I can do this. I'm just going to have to click the one on the far right, and Control-W is a hotkey for closing. You can also use middle mouse to close things. My middle mouse button is breaking, so I'm just going to click and press Control-W. It doesn't work often. So I'll close all of those. Okay, so that's Alt-F7. Now Ctrl-shift-F, if you want to find something and Alt-F7's not helping you, maybe you're having issues with the code assistance. Ctrl-shift-F is a find in all files in the project, and you can filter files under file name patterns. But I can look for any text, so I could look for max threads pow2. I can choose to match case or not, whole words. I can even do regex search over the whole repository, and you can do it over any subset of the repository with browse and so on. So I'll do that to search for max threads pow2, and here are all the results. And in fact, it turned up more results than my previous find usages turned up, because there actually is another variable in another subfolder of this project which has the same name but semantically is a different variable. It's compiled in totally different compilation units for a different binary. This actually turns up all of them. Same hotkeys apply here, Control-period, Control-comma. Bookmarks are quite nice to know about, so you can create bookmarks with Control-shift-M, remove them the same way, toggle them on and off, and then you can iterate over your bookmarks here. And bookmarks sort of give you a little highlight of the lines around the bookmark on the right. you can sort of see them in context as you iterate through them, and you can just double click to go straight to them. So that's a nice little feature. What's next? So for find in all files, you can also do replace in all files. So just like you have Control-F for search, Control-H for replace, you can go to Control-Shift-F for find in all, and Control-Shift-H for replace in all. And you can even do regex replace with pattern substitution. Ctrl-alt-click is a cool one. That's expanding a macro. So if you have a macro like this pad, which is actually a macro, I can Ctrl-alt-click, and it opens up the macro expansion. Basically, if you ran the C preprocessor on this macro, you can see what's produced. Not a big deal for this super simple macro, but even with really complicated macros, it can be super helpful as you're trying to debug why a macro doesn't work to get the macro expansion and just see what's going on. It basically sends the file through the preprocessor and shows you what's emitted. And it sort of tracks your cursor as you click around in this. I'll open it up again. As I click around in this, that window updates to kind of try to stay synchronized. Okay, so custom key bindings I showed you already with the Ctrl-8 hotkey. There's also one other hotkey that's really useful to bind that isn't bound by default when you're doing remote development, and that is you can right-click on any file and you can go, well, most of the files, and you can go, let's look at this H file. I can click upload. So, F11 should upload things, right? But sometimes it's nice not to have to go through a whole compile and build just to upload one file, like a shell script that you're editing. So you'd like to be able to sort of just, oh, I changed this one file, if this is like a shell script or something. I mean, a header doesn't make sense. If you changed it, you'd want to rebuild your project anyway. So there's no real reason to upload the header alone, but let's say you wanted to. You could just click upload to jax.multicore, boom, it uploads it just like that. Now, I bound this to a hotkey, Ctrl-D. So I click this, Ctrl-D, 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 Ctrl-D. I can just upload any of those files instantly by pressing Ctrl-D. So this is a super nice feature to have, especially if I make a change to this shell script, I go echo test, save, Ctrl-D, done, it's uploaded. It's on the server right now, and if I were trying to alt-tab back to my PuTTY window to run it, I could do that. In fact, I'm not even sure if you need to save. I think you might not need to. I think you do. Okay, so you have to save, Control-S, Control-D. S and D are right next to each other, so you just hold Control and press SD. Boom, done, uploaded. So super nice little quick feature to have. Now, how do you actually bind? By the way, that allows you to upload files that, for some reason or other, don't even have an upload button here. Now, if you want those files to be uploaded automatically with the project, and they aren't, some shell scripts do get uploaded automatically, they just don't give you the manual upload option in the right-click context menu. Some files don't get uploaded no matter what you do automatically. They don't even get considered to be part of the project. So this projects view shows the things that are considered to be part of the project. The files view will show you what's actually on the file system. And there's a bunch of files here that aren't part of the project. Compiled SO files aren't considered to be part of the project by NetBeans, but I can still upload these by clicking them and going Control-D, 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 boom, they're all uploaded. I can select them all and go Control-D and they all upload at once. So that's pretty nice. If you want that to happen automatically and they're not considered to be part of the project, there's a way to manually add things to the project. You go to important files here, you go add item to important files, and then you can go lib and you can select all these things and go select and boom, now they're part of important files, and you can actually right click on important files and go upload to the server, or you can go Control-D. And I'm not 100% sure, but I don't use this too much. Normally I just, such things that aren't part of the project, I usually only have to upload once, so I just kind of press Control-D for all of them and don't worry too much about it. But I think the things that are in here actually get uploaded routinely as part of the F11 upload and build. At any rate, it's nice to know about having the important files section, so all those kinds of files are explicitly represented in the project and you don't forget about them. Okay, so that's the custom key bindings, and that was custom key bindings for expand fold tree and also for upload files. So to see what command that was, I'll search for my Control-D. My Control-D is upload to remote host. So if you want to program that hotkey yourself, just search for upload to remote host, give it a nice hotkey, whatever you like. Okay. upload to remote host. So those are two things that are nice to add custom key bindings for. And there are tons of other things that could be bound to keys. So the last thing I'll mention is the history tab. So NetBeans actually integrates with the Git repository. If you have a Git repository associated with your project, in other words, if your project is the result of cloning a Git repository, your project folder is the result of cloning a Git repository, then the history will actually show all of your commit history, and you can, click and you can observe the difference between your either whatever changed in this file in one particular commit, or you can diff from the current. So you can see how the current file differs from any commit. And in fact, NetBeans also kind of implicitly commits every time you save, and at regular time intervals in its own local repository that doesn't rely on an external Git repository. And what you see is kind of the union of the local commits and the actual global Git commits with their commit messages. So it's this extremely powerful kind of time capsule feature, and their diff is actually really, really nice down here. You can also use this kind of diff, so you can say like, oops, I don't like this change, I want to cancel this change, and you can basically end up editing the file by clicking the little X here. I can delete that change, and I can sort of, in some sense, I can sort of merge the previous Git commits changes selectively back into this file. I'll undo those because I don't want those changes. So that's the history view. It's super nice. You get like basically an unbounded history with like thousands of commits for every file, and it's super efficiently implemented. You can also use that really nice diff capability outside the context of version control. You can use it just to diff, if I have like maybe there's something I have that will look somewhat similar if I diff two versions of it. Okay, so here, for example, if I look at the stage 1 implementation and stage 2 implementation, I can hold down Control and click the other, and I can go right-click, Tools, Diff, maximize this. And now I can actually just kind of zoom in really quickly on all of the differences between the files. I can go from difference to difference with the down arrow here. I forgot the hotkey for it because I usually just scroll. So you can see what all the differences are, and you can kind of, again, you can kind of merge selectively the differences over to the right. So being able to diff inline with this really nice diff interface is quite nice. Okay, so that was diff support. So that, I think, concludes most of the sort of interesting NetBeans tips and tricks. I hope this stuff is useful to you.